Welcome to the Evolution Partners podcast, where I talk with the world's leading thinkers, planners, and doers who are helping to build great companies in their own way. We learn how the work they're doing is creating an impact and get to know a little bit more about them and what makes them tick. This episode is brought to you by Evolution Partners, where we help leaders to confidently build enduring great companies using our proven, structured, strategic planning process that ensures you build and execute the right plan. Check us out at evolutionpartners.com.au. Also, you can check out our books, Made to Thrive, outlining how to be a great CEO, as well as Onboarded, which is about making your new hires more effective faster. James King is a founding partner of multiple companies within trading, technology, and investment management that have generated outlier returns. As CEO, he's built and led talent pathways that have generated over $1 billion in net profit. He's passed one of the most arduous military selection tests in the world and has led elite performance programs within the UK Special Mission Units. In sport, he's advised multiple world champions, Olympic gold medalists, owners, general managers, and superstars within the Premier League, NFL, and NBA. James' methodology and successes have been shared through case studies at top MBA programs at the University of Oxford, Harvard, MIT, and Princeton. He has a first-class honours degree with the highest distinction and a Masters of Science in Performance Psychology. Everything he does is evidence-based, practice-led. James, thanks for joining me today.
Oh, Brad, it's a privilege. It's been long overdue as well. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Me too. James, what a journey. I struggled to compress your achievements and to compress and try to edit it down so I didn't spend the whole podcast just talking about the stuff that you've done. You've had an amazing journey. If you can, just give us the Cliff's Notes, the top kind of level overview about your journey so far.
Yeah, well, thank you. That's very kind. And I would probably use the word unconventional. So, look, I've had this sort of love affair with human performance, in particular the subject excellence. And for me, that all started as a kid. There's a moment that jumps out for me. I must have been about 6 years old. My dad was in the Air Force. And at the time, we were living in Sardinia, a small island just off Italy. And there was a British and American Air Force base there. This is around the time of the First Gulf War. And I'm about 6 years old. Mum and my younger sister are going back to London for a weekend. And I'm staying with Dad. So this is my first sort of lads weekend, as it were. And I get to go to work with Dad on Friday. And this is long before any health or safety or anything like that. And Dad was an aircraft technician. So we're on the flight line, stood there. And, you know, there I am sort of sat next to my dad. He sort of gives a crisp nod to the pilot. He's sort of, the sun's glistening off his visa, like it's it's like a scene from Top Gun, the heat shimmering off the tarmac, all that stuff. It's the real movie version of cool to me at 6-year-old. And then all of a sudden, this Tornado GR4 just rips down the runway like spitting blue fire. The ground shaking beneath me, then whack! It's up into the air and like gone within a blink of the eye.
Wow!
And my 6-year-old brain, like the whole world shook. And then later that evening, there was another unique experience for me. We're watching, again, just me and Dad hanging out and watching World's Strongest Man.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm suddenly watching these beasts of human beings defy gravity itself. Then the next morning, we go and watch a rugby game. And I think it was the Royal Air Force playing a top local Italian team. And we all know, well, not Italian rugby's come on, but not the high standard. But there's this one player for the RAF, and he single-handedly sort of wins the game for the Air Force. And I remember at 6 years old, at the end of that weekend, thinking, like, just wow. Like, a spark was lit for me. Like,
yeah.
And this question hit me square between the eyes. It was like, why does he get to fly that fighter jet? Why is that individual the strongest person in the world? Why is it that individual can have such this incredible effect on the opposition for the rest of his team? And then, most importantly, is doing cool stuff like that, or having that sort of impact controllable. Do we all get the opportunity to do cool stuff like that? Or is it just a gift from the gods, you know? And that, for me, like the fuse was lit there and then, and everything I did subsequently was related to almost, and still is, to mastering my answer to that question. And I fast forwarding a bit, I guess I was very lucky. You mentioned to study at the University of Edinburgh. At the time, it was the only course in the world that offered performance psychology, which is the study of excellence, mastery, and expertise. And what's very unique about that is that, you know, most science degrees, one of the first things you're taught is how actually to delete measurement error. The aim's to identify trends. That's what gets you published as a scientist or an academic practitioner. So we want to learn, as an example, how long it takes the average child to learn to write, read, walk or talk, or the average employee to make a set number of sales. That's how we traditionally look at the way we measure or understand things. But there's a big problem of that when it comes to excellence. And that's that you cannot learn about excellence through studying the average. So as a science, it flips that medical model that's used traditionally across science degrees on its head. And instead of deleting outliers as measurement error, we delete the trend and look at the outliers. So we want to identify and examine the causal mechanisms that enable those individuals or organizations across multiple domains. It's another thing I loved about the subject. We're studying individuals in performing arts, music, military, sport, but those that have excelled at the upper limits of human potential across a prolonged period of time. And then with that understanding of what drives that success, we're able to, of course, go out into the world and work with organizations to bring them into alignment with the controllable mechanisms that effectively increase their probability of success. And, you know, after Edinburgh, I had you touched very briefly, but I had an experience with the military. That was something in me I wanted to do. And after sort of 5 years of studying at Edinburgh, I was desperate to put this, by the end of it, I was just sick of writing essays and being in the lab. And I thought I knew it all as well. And I was like, right, I want to try this on personally. This is incredible. I was just, you know, for my first day at that course, I remember there's a lecture on expertise, and I remember like turning to the left and right, looking at my peers, genuinely like, oh my God, did you just hear that? This increases the odds of this by that. Like, I genuinely could not understand why every business leader, every sports manager, politician was not in that room leveraging this science. So I was desperate to put it into practice, and one of the areas I perceived would be great to do so was in the military. It was sort of something that was inside me I wanted to experience, and I embarked on I would end up embarking on what is a very rigorous selection process with an elite unit within British military, British Army, and that was a very humbling experience. I very quickly realised that 80% of what I taught at Edinburgh does not stand up to the real world.
Yeah.
There's certainly then as well, that was a ruthless environment in terms of giving me an opportunity to see the Darwinian way in which elite organisation, the tip of the spear, the British Army, had worked out how to select and develop individuals. I mean, some of the individuals involved couldn't break down why things were done that way, but they were effectively done that way because of nature and being at war with the British Army for hundreds of years. It works. And it was brilliant to experience it firsthand, go through that selection process, the training, and also to try on and experience firsthand, you know what it feels like to be pushed to your absolute limits. And I learned some real sort of powerful lessons on that. For starters, 80% of what I learned at Edinburgh just doesn't work, and it started that journey of me becoming what I described as a scientist practitioner. Right, okay, I've got all this, I'm taking it to practice now, but now I'm going to start to refine what works and how, and for me personally, but also at the organizational level. Eventually, I sort of felt like I'd got what I needed from that experience, and then I moved into the business world. Chance opportunity, really switched on. Super trader from Goldman Sachs reached out to Edinburgh and was like, "Look, I want to apply all this stuff you're studying." You know, he had that proactivity to identify that this was the only course in the world, and very kindly my professors put them in touch with me, and I had a dinner with him, and to cut to the chase, he was like, you know, we just riffed for hours, man. That was just the energy in the room was charged. It was beautiful. It was awesome. He was talking about his experience with the investment banks. I was talking about what I'd studied and what I'd seen in the performance environment I'd been in with the military. And at the end of the meal, he was just like, right, I want you to put this organization. He just set up his own trading house. He thought he could do it better than Goldman in the relative space he was in. And he said, bring this organization under alignment with everything we know, the stuff we'll talk about today about elite performance. And we did, in terms of how we selected talent, how we developed that talent, how we managed and led that talent to access all the technical ability they possessed when it mattered most, and then how to sort of keep pushing forward. And, that became sort of a bit of a success story. We went from sort of generating $0 of profit to 3 years later, we were trading more barrels a day in terms of we were in oil derivatives than BP, Shell, Glencore. And I think our net return, risk-adjusted returns were over 3,000%, and it was sort of unheard of and a bit of a success story. And we were doing it with a bunch of predominantly 23, 24-year-old graduates. And so that was an incredible experience. And then, of course, in and around that, I've had experiences you've touched on to present on some of the case studies where I've had success. But then also I've been diving into different in sport. I've done a lot of short, sharp sledgehammer work, off-season, pre-season. I describe it as holding the mirror up to the organisation. I sort of use the term a performance audit. This is what we know about human performance. To what extent are you aligned with these principles? From our perspective, here's where you are. What do you think? I love it, man. It's brilliant, and I want to get the message out there. I've seen firsthand the good this body of science can do, and for me, it's criminal that it's not everywhere. So that's why I'm really enjoying having conversations with guys like you, Brad.
Brilliant. A couple of things. First of all, having read the book, so your book is called Accelerating Excellence. Brilliant book. Quite a thick book, but it's not fluff, right? We read books and it's like, you could have done that in a quarter of the space. There's a lot in there. Okay, so that's good. But two things. First of all, one of the things I really want to tag for our listeners is that this is not about getting a bit better. This is not saying, how do we become this is about elite. And very much that message came home to me through the book. So I feel like I need to give that context for the listeners. This is about how do you become elite. Now, the second and connected part, I want to draw a picture about what you described before of outliers. So if you can imagine an XY graph and there's a 45-degree line that's emanating or going across that, this is what you're calling the average, right? And then there's one dot that is way off to the side, and that is the outlier, and this is what you're studying. So you've got to, as a listener, think about, this is what we're talking about, the people who are way off to the side.
And shall I tell you what, Brad, there's a good example I might give that also allows me to process some of the motives for writing this book. And I'll give you an example, right? So I've got this issue with, and we've talked about this in person, but one of the things that frustrates me is there's a lot of, I feel like the pendulum needs to shift in terms of who is speaking to the public about elite performance. And I mean that word term, elite performance. Yeah. Because for me, there are too many people who in reality are either marketing experts or social media influencers who are experts at that, who are then using their expertise there to sell messages about things they don't really know much about, but that are topical or trending. I mean, the personal development space is like a charged fire hose to the face. And I think the other side of that is you've got journalists who are elite at journalism or writing. But again, they are owning the narrative on elite performance. And that really frustrates me because, and the reason why, Brad, is it's honestly just because I sincerely find it heartbreaking when I see the amount of ambitious people out there that are digging out blind, following the wrong advice, and therefore digging the wrong direction, and not therefore generating or converting all that ambition, talent, and effort into performance. And for me, when anyone increases their performance, the world wins. When anyone goes out and gets better at whatever it is they do, the world gets a little bit better. I genuinely believe that's how we save the world. And can you imagine the good we could do if everyone got their shit together and we sort of were more effective with how we spent those raw ingredients. And linking back to the graph you were talking about, one example of that, and he's got a bit of heat for it, so I'll go easy on him, but Malcolm Gladwell. And again, these guys are brilliant. Like I do enjoy their books, and it's nothing personal. But he talks about the 10,000 hour rule, and it went viral.
Yeah.
Now, if it takes you 10,000 hours to excel, there is something seriously wrong with your methodology. Unless perhaps in a few bespoke areas, like you're trying to be a chess grandmaster, incredibly competitive. Yeah, even if you do everything really effectively, you're going to have to clock reps in some specific areas. I've seen people go from 0 to Olympic athlete, from 0 to, and I'm talking tip of the spear special forces operator, and 0 to hedge fund manager managing 500 million AUM in less than 3-4 years, and in way less than 10,000 hours.
Yeah.
And in Malcolm's book, Outliers, he talks about the 10,000 hours, and he proclaims that that's the key to success. And in that study he deducted that from, it was actually a single study. So the science is just from a method, any scientist is going to the blood's going to curdle listening to this. But, one study, violinists, 14 practitioners, one did it in 2,700 hours. The mean time was actually 10,700 hours. Another individual did it 28,500 hours. And this is to get to expert status in playing the violin. Now, the mind that makes that deduction for me should not be preaching about what it takes to excel. And what we would do in reference to the graph you were describing is in performance science, we would look at 1,000 studies like that. We would take the individual that did it in 2,700 hours, 10 times quicker than the slowest individual, and almost 3 times quicker than the mean. And we would identify what was unique about that individual. What was unique about this individual that just stood right out? And then that's where we go and do our research. And yes, this is focused in on elite performance. I have always worked where risk is highest. And the reality is that the organizations I work with are where they're ruthless in terms of performance is all that matters, and for me, the reason I've done that is I enjoy working with those people because they tend to be very smart, very hardworking, in those environments where you're exposed to the truth quite quick, where you get shot in the face if you get it wrong. People tend to want the truth, and there's less ego, there's more humility, because it just becomes about delivering the result. And it's the same I've found at the tier one end of finance and in elite sport. People are very serious. They're on the line. They're not hiding behind a desk or can't be political within an organization. They're on the pitch and they look like an idiot if they make a mistake. And that creates the internal drive that makes it very easy for me because they want to listen and they want the truth. And to sound a bit cliched, some people can't handle the truth when it comes to performance. But I'll take a breath now, but hopefully that gives a bit more context.
No, that's good. And like I said, I wanted to highlight those 2 points because they're so essential. Like we're not talking about being really good. We're talking about elite, as I said in that graph. Now, in the book, you say that performance is never a coincidence. And I kind of found that within the context of all of the words to be a little bit pivotal. And it's like there's a lot that's hinging off of that statement. Can you explain what you mean by that? Performance is never a coincidence.
Yes. So performance is never a coincidence. And what I mean by that is that everyone that has excelled has done so because they have aligned with a very specific set of mechanisms and principles. Whether they realize it or not is potentially a question. And unfortunately, way too many who have excelled have done so because of it's fortunate that they've ended up under those conditions, but no one excels unless they align to a very high extent with the mechanisms and principles that we're going to talk about. And there are 4 mechanisms, each contain principles, and the more you align with them, the further and faster your rate of progress will be. Yep. No one can guarantee success, but what we can do, and what I perceive my role to be, in terms of those I care for, manage and lead, is to stack the odds of success as high as I can in their favor so that, we might not win every game, every battle, but across time, we sort of win the war. So we're looking at like building a casino.
Yeah. There is a system for want of a better term, there is a set of
Yes.
things that make it work. It looks easy, but it's not. So we touched on this a little bit earlier. You say that many of the people that are providing information about human performance aren't actually working in elite performance. I laugh because it's kind of blindingly obvious and ironic in a way, and that's a problem. You then talk about the 5 sources of information about human performance. Can you tell us about this problem and why it's an issue and what we need to do about it?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, I touched on it earlier. I'll try and keep it short and sweet. But yeah, I think the long and short of it is, whenever you've got this ambition to go out and pursue something, we're blessed with the internet, and Lord knows how many apps that we can source information from, and it's a wonderful, wonderful thing, and it really democratizes access to improvement. I love it. However, I do think people need to be aware of the benefits and limitations with the areas they source expertise from. And I'll give you a few examples. So I talked about journalists, like the likes of Malcolm Gladwell. You know, these guys are brilliant writers, and they're fantastic books. And I really enjoy reading them, for the record. But I read them on a beach on holiday, if I could sit down for an hour or so. And now I think of them as almost like the gateway to learning more about elite performance. But they're not going to give you the answers for the reasons we discussed. These individuals don't know. They do superficial skims. And where they have 9 out of 10 expertise is writing and communication, and to get you to keep reading. And that's different from solving your problem if your ambition is I need to understand where my skills are breaking down and what I can do to get better and maximize my development trajectory. Malcolm Gladwell quite simply isn't an expert at that. He hasn't aligned with the mechanisms and principles that would make him an expert in that. And it's the same with a lot of individuals online who are talking about personal development with amazing intentions, and they spread a message. However, there's no substance to the message because it's copy-paste, superficial advice like be more confident, motivated, disciplined. And it's like, my mum's been telling me that my whole life, and I'm sure your mum's done the same. The real question is like, I get it. How? How do I become more motivated? How do I become more disciplined? I know I want my team to be more confident and more disciplined and more motivated, but how do I tangibly action that? And I think that's where we're left with some hollow advice, and I often describe it as this sort of, it's the white bread of psychological nutrition. Yeah. So that's another area. I think then we've got what I would describe as single discipline specialists. So, it's the data guy that says, it's all about data. Or it's the ice bath guy that's, you just got to ice bath, it's going to save everything. That's the key to you. Or it's the supplements, or it's the... And as far as I'm concerned, all those things are tip of the iceberg stuff. The real deep substance, big levers in terms of performance are often missed completely. And again, when everyone says excellence is all about X, Y, or Z, they're talking shit, and run. That would be my advice, because it's multifactorial. And the real art in elite performance, and I think for any leader of any business, is to know, and mate, I could go into the All Blacks tomorrow. I could go into the Google, I could go into SEAL Team 6 Command Team, and there will be 1,000 things we could improve or do to get better. Yeah. The challenge is, how do we identify the 1, 2, 3 things to do that will maximally impact our development trajectory? Yeah. And that's the job of the leader, because it's easy to come up with things we could hypothetically do to get better. And it's left us with this reasoning by analogy approach whereby, Google have beanbags, we should get some, or Gwyneth Paltrow meditates, I should meditate. And, and unfortunately, that's not the way outliers excel.
And once 1 or 2 of those things don't work, people think everything doesn't work.
And that's what's so sad, and that's what upsets me, because the amount of intent, and like, there is nothing more innate in human beings than ambition. Yeah. And everyone has talent. Not anyone can excel at anything, but anyone has something they can excel at. And I honestly think the impact we could have if more people knew how to get better faster and accelerate their pursuit of excellence in whatever area it is that's important to them, we all win.
I think that one of the things I like between the lines, having seen you speak and present and read the book is what you just said then, which is everyone has something that they can be good at. Because there is a line of thinking which is let's get the elite and then let's throw everyone else on the trash heap.
It becomes a belief system within society, and it's a toxic one. And this is why I get frustrated with people that peddle shit advice. And it's because when you naturally go out into the world, and so I, as an example, I was performance expert for 5 years for Men's Health magazine. And, I'd get emails from readers of the magazine, and I used to get really frustrated because they'd see the guys on the front cover and they'd go, well, I've been following this program, and these are hard programs, man. It takes a lot of commitment, especially if you've got kids, family. And they'd be like, I'm doing the program, I've been doing the nutrition, and I don't look anything like the guy on the front cover. And I'm like, oh. And some guys, this is serious, right? Some people are in really dark places with this. And this is where, this frustration for me started and grown and accelerated, because people then deduct or make two assumptions. Number one, the whole personal development and the idea of it is bullshit. You dealt the cards you get and that's it, which is a load of bollocks. Or it's that I just don't have what it takes.
Yeah.
And they reluctantly decide to accept their mediocrity, which is just kills me.
I want to ask you about self-concordance. Now, I'm not so proud as to say that when you first said concordance, I wasn't like, what does that mean? So, and then Googling it, right? So I'll leave that there. You say that self-concordance is the essential foundation that all excellence is built from. However, some people would have us believe that excellence is built from hard work and determination, to your earlier point. So can you tell us what's concordance and why is it essential to building excellence?
So I talked about how performance is never a coincidence, and there's certain mechanisms, and each mechanism contains principles, and the more you align with them, the further and faster your rate of progress will be. Like anything in any area of science, there's the Pareto law generally applies, right? Now, when it comes to accelerating excellence or getting better at anything, and for in fact having a rich and meaningful life, there is nothing that comes before getting this right. You can do all the ice baths, drink all the kale smoothies, do all the meditation, listen to all the videos from Jocko, Goggins and the boys. You will, if you're not doing this, you're stuck. So it works like this. Just like a baseball bat has a location at which the ball rebounds off the bat at a greater velocity than if struck at any other point, so do you. You have a sweet spot. And when the goals that you pursue and the way that you pursue them align with your sweet spot, you set yourself up for an inordinate amount of success. And your sweet spot exists at the intersection of three things. This is about aligning who you are with the goals that you pursue and the characteristics and qualities that make you unique. And that's the key word. This is about you. You need to become the expert on you. And there are three crucial areas. So your strengths. So the strengths are the things that come naturally to you. And it's just a biological fact.
Yeah.
Usain Bolt was born with more fast twitch fibers in his little finger than I was in my entire body. And that's a fact. And the reason strengths are so important is because they dictate your baseline ability and your responsiveness to training. So when you have greater strengths in an area, you are more responsive to training, which means for every bout or exposure to high quality practice, you will experience a greater effect. So if you have greater strengths than me, Brad, and we train for an hour in a high quality training environment, you might profit 3 units of progress. And if I get 1, 2, 6 months from now, I'm never catching you up, no matter how ambitious I am or how hard I try. So to excel, you need to identify the areas for which you have strengths and pursue goals that leverage those strengths and mitigate your weaknesses, ideally where your weaknesses don't matter. And this isn't like one strength's better than another. It's that, which strength matches the goal you pursue best. And I guess in terms of your strengths, there's obviously the obvious sort of technical abilities. So there's an obvious sporting ability. So if you're 6'5" and you've got a VO2 max of 80 at birth, then okay, you could be an incredible Olympic rower potentially. You're going to increase your odds in that aspect at least. And again, it doesn't guarantee success, but it just qualifies you for success.
Yes.
And that's the point. And then we've got what's really important is your psychological strengths. So in relation to how you process the world, how you feel, these are the classic things you might talk about or learn from an Ocean personality test or Myers-Briggs. And again, I think it's done really badly in terms of a lot of businesses do this, but they get the token lecture from someone that doesn't really get where this lecture fits into the broader human performance system. Therefore, the value of it's lost. But you need to align the way that you pursue your goals with a way that leverages your personality strengths and again mitigates their weaknesses. As an example, I learn best through conversation and discussion. Lock me in a room for 4 hours with a textbook and see how much, how many units of progress I produce. Put me in a room where I'm reading for 15 minutes, talking for 45. The difference for me in all other units of progress is going to be, again, huge. Coming back real quick in the technical strengths, obviously we've got physical aspects which are relevant to the athlete or special forces operator or physical tasks. But then in the knowledge working world, we've got cognitive strengths. So, it could be gifted with words, numbers, it could be people, communication. There's all sorts of aspects there. But then even deeper within that, in numbers, is what numbers, under what conditions, Then we move on to the second phase of concordance, which is our interests. So your interests, and it works a bit like this. Interests are the things you're instinctually drawn to. And this is a key word, instincts. Mm-hmm. You watch someone on a football pitch, you watch someone in a boardroom and see where their instincts take them. You think about when your instincts kick in. These are the things you just love to do or you're drawn to do. And it could start at the broad level of like, I look at my dad with this, for instance. He's just obsessed with motorbikes. He would spend his weekend stripping his motorbike down to build it back up, to just tweak something that, to me, I'm like, what difference did that make? And that's where interest is so important, because it works like this.
Yeah. You
don't need to motivate a child to play. And when you're pursuing goals, so you're leveraging your strengths in an area you're sincerely interested in, you lose track of time. You don't have to activate willpower, discipline, anywhere near as early as someone who is less interested. And this means you can outstruggle the rest. It's not hard to read about oil derivatives markets all weekend if you are sincerely interested in oil derivatives markets. It feels like home for you to do that. Yeah. And that gives you an enormous edge over the competition. And principally two things. So when you pursue your interest, your brain literally has an analgesic effect. So it literally shuts off pain and suppresses anxiety. So, and these are very real, tangible factors. And your interests emerge from the same part of our brain as thirst and hunger, which is why they reveal themselves to us like a feeling for a thirst for knowledge in a certain area or a hunger to explore something or other. We need to pay attention to these. First off, we need to understand that these are very real biological mechanisms, but that where to apply them. Then, and the key thing, and this is what you'll see in your team if you're a manager or a leader listening to this, is you'll see the team you lead, you'll see the people that are sincerely interested, because they will do that second level thinking. If you're not sincerely interested and you're just doing it for the money or because you feel like, I'm quite good at this, you'll just sort of rat race your way through. You're looking forward to the next paycheck bonus, but you won't do that second level thinking and go engage in that curiosity-based exploration. It's key to excel in anything. The last phase is values. Values are quite simply, what's important to you in the context of your life, career. If we're talking about performance and work, probably a career. But this is about, you bring the blood, sweat and tears to achieve your goals because doing so fulfills your values.
Yeah.
So if you want people to fight for your cause, you better make damn sure that it aligns with their values, or you're going to reward them in the context of their values. And it enables, when you're pursuing goals that leverage your align with your values, you increase the symmetry in terms of the odds you're prepared to face and the risks you're prepared to take. And this is why special forces operators will kick door down doors down with guys with machine guns on the other sides, because for them, their values are to perhaps soldier at the highest level, protect democracy and freedom in their community. It could be a myriad of things, but in their head, this aligns with that. Therefore, I will take asymmetric risk to do so and to get the job done. And, you know, you look at Elon Musk putting all his personal wealth up for grabs in the earlier days with some of the businesses he was involved in. You don't do things like that, and people don't bring that sort of behavior. And this is where it's so important to understand these concepts, because people are like, well, I can't motivate my team. If your team aren't motivated, probably because they're not in their sweet spot. Are you leveraging their strengths? Are you giving them tasks to pursue in areas they're sincerely interested in? Do they understand that the values of the organisation, and are they linked to their values? Because if they're not, then you're not going to see that high performance. And just to sum up there, the secret behind concordant goals is that they switch us from our sort of what we call consumatory reward system, which is I go to work, I get paid, then I have no motivation. It's the sort of I'm hungry, I eat, but then I'm not hungry again, to what we call our dopaminergic incentive reward system. And this is where, when we pursue these goals, dopamine along with serotonin and anandamide, oxytocin, norepinephrine, all these other neurochemicals kick in, and they activate your psychological firepower. So positive motivation, they all flow from the same part of your brain. It's all just positive emotion. And that's to fuel the pursuit of a goal. And the evolutionary mechanism there is to guide you along your path of maximal development. This isn't some freakish hack to get a six-pack or get the next paycheck or make more money than Bezos. This is a very base level, first principles, biological, evolutionary component that you have in your hardware, whether you like it or not. And if you want to excel, and if you want the people you lead to excel, then you need to look to these principles when you're not seeing what you want to see from them in relation to some of those behaviors we're talking about. And this is where, that's sort of at the top level, why that's so important. I hope it makes sense. I can't emphasize enough how important it is.
No, it's great. Is it hard to find for an individual listener? They've got it. Do you think it's hard to find? How do people find that? Is it a process of elimination? Is it sitting on top of the mountaintop and chanting? Any reaction to that question?
Definitely not sitting on top of the mountaintop. So the first thing I would say is, and I'm speaking to people directly listening to this, the question to ask yourself is it hard to ride a bike? Is it hard to drive a car? Is it hard to speak English? Well, of course it is. If you've not done it before, you've not looked at it. But everything's hard if you don't know how to do it. But the learning how, it's absolutely, I would say it's easier than any of those tasks I just mentioned. You know where your sweet spot is. You just haven't spent the time to step back and reflect on, wow, where was my baseline ability actually higher than the rest? Or, top quartile maybe in terms of the normal distribution curve. Where was it maybe off the charts? Okay, wow. Where was I really responsive to training? They're two simple questions. Interest, where do I lose track of time? What do I find myself guided to when I don't have constraints imposed on me? Where do I go? What do I read? What books do I start and actually finish? And we'll put up a link in the show notes to a 1 hour guided session where I chuck a million questions at you to help elicit this. And there are no excuses to this. And that's my mission, to remove every excuse for everyone out there not to be everything they can be. There's no excuse. It does take time, does take a bit of effort. But in terms of risk-adjusted returns on time and effort for performance, there is nothing more important than this in terms of your own performance and that of those you care for, manage and lead. So no, it's not complex. It requires a bit of time. It requires reflection. It might require a few conversations with people that are close to you to soundboard off. It might require you to do a few cognitive test batteries, maybe even complete a few psychometric tests. It might also require getting some feedback of people you've worked with, but you know exactly where it is. And your body's evolved to guide you where it is, where you have those bursts of inspiration or motivation. Guess what your body's doing to you there? It's trying to tell you, hey, this is where you're supposed to be. This is what you're supposed to be doing. Do more of this. And it's about learning to listen to that. But of course, if you don't know the concept exists, then it's hard to do that.
One of the things that we're told is to follow your passion. You go online, you'll find a billionaire or a very successful person talking to some graduates saying, follow your passion. But you challenge this popular notion and instead say that we should follow our interests, and that those interests allow us to clock free repetitions. I just love that we can clock these free repetitions that lead to compounding. Can you tell us about the difference between passion and interests and why it's important that interests disguise repetition?
Absolutely. And so think of passions as an affair and interests as a marriage. So passions change across time. You know, if I'm on holiday in Mexico, I can get passionate about playing volleyball every morning at 10 o'clock for a week. You know, I can get interested. In terms of interest, though, they're stable across time. And I think in terms of reflecting on interest, one of the things that I always encourage people to do is almost go back to childhood. You know, like I could talk to you about mine. I shared the story earlier. Like, wow, what was it that got me as a kid? That was what moment did jump out at me? That was one. Why? It's not because it's delving into the context. It's not because, oh, wow, I want to be a pilot. Oh, wow, I want to build airfix models. It wasn't that. The question was, why did they get to do that? Is that, you know, for me, that's something that's, you know, when I do the reflection or that introspection that comes up, and they're stable across time. And when things are stable across time, you're able to compound them. Passions aren't. And you can be sold passions. You can't be sold interests. No one could sell me to get sincerely interested in motorbikes. I'm just not. I just don't share that interest with my dad. Yeah. I can do my test and go on a bike on a nice sunny day, but I'm going to be on the guy on the Triumph who's just doing it to look cool, turn up, have a pint, slip off. I'm not going to be there on the weekend slipping it down. You know, one of the guys that my dad would look down at is not a true believer or just one of these likes the movie version of riding a motorbike. And that's the key thing. We all like the movie version of, oh, I want to be a Navy SEAL. The movie version of, oh yeah, I want to be a CEO. Do you actually? You know, are you sincerely interested in the things that a CEO does? And this is where I often describe this as like the sexy myth, which you can become passionate about. You know, we fall in love with you know, that it could be a partner with a nice smile and incredible body, and wow, that's attractive for a while. Yeah. But that's not going to be sustainable across time. And if it's not sustainable across time, forget it, because you cannot compound and hit tipping points which will explode you to the next levels. And that's why that's so important. And you'll reach, you won't release in a sustainable fashion the neurochemicals that drive that psychological firepower consistently across time and that don't degrade. I don't know if anyone's listening's ever had a moment where there's some spots you might go for a stroll. So for instance, where I live, I'm down in the New Forest in the UK and I travel quite a bit. But when I'm here, there's a couple of routes I can walk and they never get boring to me. And it's an example of like how an interest works. I'm never going to get bored of this view. Yeah. Whereas I might go to, so as another example of something that might represent a passion, I went to Toronto and I saw Niagara Falls and it was really cool. But after I'd seen it for a day, I'd sort of seen it. You know, I go to Paris to see the Eiffel Tower. Oh, cool. And I appreciate it. Wow. But it's not me. And it's about what things do you connect with at that deep level that will not fade across time.
You talk about recruiters not being talent identification specialists, but instead many can be salespeople. What's the problem that this creates for organisations, and what should leaders do instead?
Yeah. I'm just realising how awful I sound. I've just been slagging off authors, social media influencers, recruitment consultants.
That's what gets the clicks.
Another areas in the book for anyone listening. And I'm joking there. The recruitment consultants can get it. Of course, some of them, there's different types. But the reality is, again, follow the money. Right. The Instagram star you're taking advice on personal development for, they get paid because they're good at marketing. They get paid because they're good at social media. They get paid because... You know, top sports. Like who do the All Blacks call and pay money when they want advice on resilience? Who do top special forces teams call when they want advice on selection? They're the individuals, if you want advice on selection, that I would seek advice from, not not people talking. And this is the same problem with recruitment consultants. When you look at follow the money. They're paid for making sales. They're salespeople. That's what they are good at. The best recruitment people are great salespeople.
Yeah.
And that's not to say great salespeople don't have a lot of integrity and they build great relationships with you. But the point I tried to make in the book is you cannot rely on their opinions, and you cannot just take outsource talent identification. Because, by the way, the aim of talent identification solely and exclusively should be to identify concordant performers and bring them into your organization. And, in terms of the ability to do that, cannot be outsourced. You need to understand these fundamental mechanisms, and you need to design systems and structures that verify objectively beyond a reasonable doubt that the individuals possess the specific strengths you need and the specific interests that will be required to spend the time that you need these individuals to be, to be focused on and investing their time in, and rely on and the values that align with your organization. And just because someone's done it somewhere else or another organization or the recruiter says so, doesn't mean they'll fit you. I mean, how many times do we see in sport huge transfers that just go wrong? And you can sit in the top guys in sport, and I'll talk to these guys privately before some of these transfers happen, and we're like, oh my God, that's going to be a car crash. And it's because, objectively, we've got the data and we can look and be like, that guy's strength's here, but they don't play like that. Yeah. So they're going to play this guy that might have scored 30 goals a year for the last 4 years. But they don't play in that way. He's not going to be able to leverage his strengths. In fact, what we do is we open him up to the weakness that comes with that strength, because there's always duality in strengths and weakness. So therefore, you're playing the individual out of position, and this is why you have to take ownership in terms of the way, and then you need to take responsibility for using the recruitment consultants for what they're good at, not outsourcing talent to them.
One of the things that you said there was you've got to identify concordant performers and bring them into the organization and have a mechanism and a system for doing that. And this is what you did at Mandara. You were the performance director, where you were charged with improving the performance of oil traders. This is the entrepreneur from, I think it was Morgan Stanley, that you said you met and had dinner with earlier today. But Mandara's competition would BHP, Shell, Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs, among others. These are huge businesses that can pay more to get the best people. And really, they could just hire as many people as they wanted and then pick the ones that were the best performers and get rid of the rest. Yet, against that competition, you developed a strategy that ultimately hired the best, and the results were remarkable. Can you share that story with us?
Sure. So again, that we had that dinner, and we agreed, like, right, let's attack this. Let's apply the principles. And then, those listening will, practice what I preach. Right. Number one, the individuals in this organization concordant. So the first question I think any leader should ask themselves, and I certainly, the model I have in my head is like, right, if I want people to excel, I need to understand very specifically what I want them to excel in. So I need to understand the demands I'm going to impose on them at a technical level, a psychological level, and if we're talking sport and military, at a physical level. Yep. Because if I don't know what the extreme scenarios that they're going to be put under, then how can I possibly vet or verify who's capable and has the capacity to meet those demands? Because that's your job. You need to bring in the hardware that has the capacity to meet the demands you impose on them. And that's where, for me, 90% of organizations go wrong. They don't understand this. And I can ask them this question. So what are the demands you impose on the individuals? Okay, in terms of the complexity of the problems you want them to solve, the time frames you want them to solving, the way in which you want them to be solved. And if they can't answer those questions, then there's a problem, because we're already working off like, I don't know, we're just trying to get things to fit, So it always starts there. Once we understand that, what we can do is get an idea of what the sweet spot of that individual would look like, or the individual that might excel in here. Because we know, like, right, okay, again, studying excellence, what the outliers that have excelled in this style of trading, let's test them. Slam them on cognitive test batteries. Let's do some psychometric testing. Let's do some qualitative interviews. Let's identify patterns, trends, IQ testing even. Where's the baseline? No one's ever done it that's below this. Doesn't mean it can't happen, but means maybe less likely. Let's make this significant. It's effectively applying the scientific method to identify, well, what are the technical strengths required for this style of trading? Because again, in trading, and this is another mistake I think a lot of businesses make, it's people generalize way too much. To say I want to be a trader or I want to hire a great trader, and then they default to what they hear in the media again. Well, I just need, trading is all about discipline, motivation, and you've got to be confident, you've got to be smart. Like, yeah, mate, so's everyone. So's every role. You've got to be all those things, for whether you want to work in the NHS as a nurse, whether you want to work for MI5, whether you want to work at my local McDonald's drive-through. We all want those traits. But the thing we need to do is what specifically in relation to this role, where specifically resilience, what does that even mean? Like, how specifically resilience? The military environment, okay, I need someone who can, if the RAF get lost and drop us in the wrong place, and now we've got to do a 25k walk into the target carrying 200 pounds, and if someone gets shot, they need to be able to drag them 2 kilometres. That's an individual who weighs on average 90 kilos with 20 kilos of kit on them, and then we might have to get in a firefight that might last 24, 36 hours. The average physical intensity is there. These are the decisions they're going to have to make over that time frame. And therefore, that gives us some idea of the makeup of that individual that we're going to screen for in selection. And it's exactly the same in the knowledge working world. Understanding the problems we want them to solve, and then reverse engineering what the sweet spot looks like, what the strengths we need in terms of the technical competencies, but then also personality, psychological, and then interests. What an interest think time. What am I going to ask them to do all day long? And then values, we're thinking about reward. So at Mandara, strengths, what did we do? We did everything I talked about there, and then we recreated a simulation, a simplified simulation of the real thing that to us was the equivalent of being like, okay, we're looking for 100-meter runners, run 100 meters. And it was quite clear if someone was an outlier, like, oh my God, you're 11 years old, you've never been to an athletics club, and you've just run an 11-second 100 meters. Right, okay, they've got the strength, tick. But that doesn't matter unless they've also got the interests and values. So then we move to that next stage. Yeah. In terms of interest, we're going to ask these individuals to work minimum 16, potentially 18-hour days as oil derivatives traders. And I know some people might scoff at that, and I'm not here to discuss the ethics of it, but that was the reality of the role. And minimum 6 days a week. They're in 7 days a week, but maybe they do just 5-6 hours on a Sunday. And by the way, these guys loved every second of it because it aligned with their sweet spot.
So I'm going to let you continue on that story. I want a clarifying question. So what's the interest of a 20, 21, 22-year-old oil trader? Because these are the people that you got, right? You got these people very young. They got paid a lot of money. I'm going through the concordance. I'm going, yeah, they got the strengths. Yeah, they got the values. What are they interested in? That is a tick.
Once they delivered, they actually took pay cuts to work for us. But yeah, I'll finish that point because it's a really good question. So the interest, what do they do all day? They're going to sit, they're going to stare at a screen, and they're going to them, again, so someone who's non-concordant might be like, oh, you just stare at a screen all day and you just got to do this and it's so monotonous and it's like this. To the concordant performer, it's like, oh my God, it's like playing a computer game. I'm literally getting paid to just sit there, test this, and when there's asymmetries, I'm looking at that, and then I work in a team, and this guy's, then this kicks off, and at this time of day, it goes mental, and this happens. We just recreate reality, and the individuals that are interested in it love it. Yep. And we made them do an 18-hour day. Guess what? Replicating exactly what we do every day, and that they're going to be doing every day for the next 3 years to hit peak performance. And the individuals that are concordant and interested, at the end of 18 hours, and I'm standing there, and the CEO's standing there, and owners standing there, and we're like, oh God, this is a long day to run. And they're like, at the early doors as well, they're changing, it's better work, because it's just like brutal days. And then we go to a pub for a beer, and this would be like 9 o'clock at night, and the individuals that were concordant are like, when we did that, what happened? Why? Oh, that was so interesting. And when you did this, was that on purpose? Or, they just loved it. Yeah. And the individuals that weren't, but that were very smart and very hardworking individuals were like, oh, you could see their body language. They were just done. And they were willpowering it, like the smile. Yeah. Think of a question type, like I'm interested. And you can just smell it on them. And it's nothing against them. We're trying to protect them as well, right? Because you don't want to waste their time. But they're not going to excel across time because they will burn out. So in terms of interest, that's how we do it. It's very simple. It's recreate what you want them to do. Do it based off extreme worst case scenarios. So, obviously we can't get them to just sit on a desk and trade millions of dollars because that's impractical, but we can simplify and create those simulations. Like the Air Force will have simulators that I'm going to put them in a 70 million jet, but they're going to put them in the sim and see how they respond in terms of the aptitude that correlates it's not correlates, is causally linked to performance as a fighter pilot. And it's doing the same in business. And again, if you're thinking, because I bet there's someone there going, oh yeah, but it's just not as simple in my industry. And I'm calling bullshit. It is. You just haven't thought about it yet. And again, it's back to riding a bike. You thought riding a bike was complicated until you were taught how to ride a bike. And I can teach you this in an hour. Again, we'll put a link in show notes to talent identification. We've got links to lectures that go specifically on how to design these assessment days to identify concordant performance, but it's not rocket science. And if you can't do it, then you should probably question whether you should be running a business, because it's your job to be able to support and run these.
So you find an effective way to select talent that is concordant with the mission of the business up against these corporations' behemoths, and it works. And so what was the result? What happened when it started working? A, and then B, if these people are concordant, now it's several years later, what are those individuals up to now? Are they successful in their field?
Yeah, it's a good question. So the last point there was values, and it's an important one. So in terms of identifying these individuals, we do the tests, but then we need to make sure that they align with our values. Because Goldman, this was around sort of 2012, 2013, we started this. 2013, the first generation came through, really. They were starting on £25,000 salary. Goldman were paying 80, 90, 100,000. Shell, 70, 80. Prestigious global brands. Exposure to, pinstripe suits, skyscrapers, all the perks. I work at GS, I work at the credibility that comes with that. No one knew who we were. So that was the first problem we needed to solve. We need to go bang our drum. Who are we? We need to create a cause, and we did. We created a mission, and it was, we think bank traders are lazy, they're apathetic, we're harder working, we don't care about the nonsense about ego and skyscrapers and, pinstripes, you can wear what you want. And here, guess what? Here, you're not going to rotate for 2 years on a grad program where you do 4 months in sales, 4 months in back office, 4 months on trading. We're going to make an undiversified bet on you, and we're going to give you everything. And if you don't hit our standards, you'll be gone quick. But if you do, a year from now, 2 years from now, you're going to be a millionaire. 3 years from now, you'll be a multi-millionaire, or you won't be here. You're trading from day one. You're not here to do support. You're not here to write research. You're here to trade. And to the right individuals, they were like, that's what I want to do. I don't want, my highest value isn't job security. My highest value is I am being a trader, and I want to go where I get the opportunity to trade, and I want to learn from the best. And that's what we offered in a way that no one else did. So we had to go out and sell that, because no one can compete. No one can compete with you. This is the whole, and by the way, an organization has a sweet spot too. No one can compete with you at being you. And this is the whole concept of sweet spot. And it works at the organizational level as well. You need to move away from this, you can be anything you want to be, to the more accurate, you can be a hell of a lot more of who you already are at the individual and organizational level. So if you try, how can we compete with Goldman Sachs at the game Goldman Sachs play? It's ridiculous. Yeah. So we had to carve our own edge. So that's a critical point. But to bring it back to your question, we identify the individuals through that test. They come in. And very quickly, the company had hired sort of, I think, 22 individuals before I joined, and none of them had sort of made an impact. What became clear quite quick was that these guys were killers. Just the behaviors. All the shit that we told at the tip of the spear stuff, confident, motivated. They were asking more questions. They're being controversial. They were challenging senior guys that were struggling, being like, why didn't you take that trade? You never want to take any risk. Literally get arguing, being direct. The individual, Alf, who was the CEO and owner who they were learning from initially, was very direct. That, people would get really upset, chuck them off the desk, just go home, you're useless. It did work like that. And he'd say that to these guys, and they'd be like, water off a duck's back, like, whatever, I'm not going home. Right, I'm going to fix it. Boom. And we just saw the behaviours changed instantly. But then it was about 12 months in, we saw the first real green shoots, where suddenly 3 or 4 just went bang, 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 and they started making money. And Alpha was like, oh, you could tell the owners were like, okay, this is going to work. And then 18 months in, there was a day where Alf was away. I sat on a 3-man management team. I was acting CEO at the time. And there was this day, Alf had the best app in the world. It was a P&L app. And he looked at it and it showed him how much money his traders were making. I'm not sure how good it was for his brain health. But one day he rang me. He was like, "What's going on? Is there a glitch in the app?" And I was like, "No, the guys are having a good day." And they'd gone from maybe generating an average of sort of $5,000 a day to 2 of them had sort of had a $200,000 day. And he was like, I was like, "No, the guys have had a good day." And I was very calm about it. They were very calm about it. And I was like, "What? They've done? Well, where are they? Are they in the pub?" He sort of insinuated that they're out drinking or celebrating. I'm like, "No, they're at their desk reviewing the morning window."
Yeah.
And for me, that's when I realised, I'm like, "Oh my God, he didn't actually believe I could do this." I was like, we were already calm and they were already calm because they trusted the process.
Yep.
Because they've been told, this is what you're going to do. Yeah. Trust me, stick to these processes, stick to these principles. These are leading indicators we're going to look at. If you do this across time, there is no chance you're not going to break through. To how far or how much, we don't quite know. And actually, the 2 individuals I'm talking about in that story, Greg Newman and Omar Khayyam, they ended up leaving Mandara and they set up a company called Onyx Commodities, who are now the world's biggest oil derivatives trader. They make up like 60-70% of the market, very close with them still, great guys. And they basically like run all derivatives. And yeah, in a nutshell, with sort of 3 months on from that day that Alf rang, he'd moved back to Singapore. There was 3 of us left to manage the business. And we did it. Alf zoomed in once a week, gave us a call. And it just compounded from there. And
awesome.
Now that whole trading space is dominated from that talent pathway. I think we're at $2 billion net profit now in terms of traders that have graduated through that pipeline, with some having some freakish years as well, and some freakish days, trading days, 50 million, 100 million years, individuals again. And obviously some of them have moved on and set up their own companies, but they completely dominate that space, completely disrupted it. Due to other reasons as well in terms of regulation, but the banks just pulled out completely because they couldn't compete.
I hope that you've enjoyed the conversation with James as much as I have today. And it's such a compelling conversation that we've broken it up into 2 parts. So this is part 1 that's now finishing. And so stay tuned next week on the Evolution Partners podcast, where you can see part 2 of my conversation with James. Well, I hope you enjoyed the episode as much as I did. If you'd be kind enough to leave a review for the podcast, that'd be really helpful to other like-minded entrepreneurs, and then we can grow our community. If you want to find out more about our guests, head over to evolutionpartners.com.au/podcast, where you can find show notes and other additional reading. Hope to see you back next week. Until then, keep thriving.